Welcome, good afternoon, Monday afternoon, the 28th of July. Moneyline MMA bringing our picks for UFC. We have an unfortunate looking Apex card. I hate to be a Debbie Downer, but this Apex card, headlined by Taira versus Hyun Sung Park, does not look like the most exciting card we've seen this year, but far from it. We got some interesting fights to discuss, but in the end, this isn't something to build your Saturday around by any means. But with that said, it still will be a card that occurs at the normal later Saturday night block timing, so it won't be daytime fights. Prelims starting at 5 p.m. Central Time. You can expect a normal timing for this Saturday's fights. But that said, quick review of last week before we get into our picks for this Saturday. UFC Abu Dhabi. Unfortunately, I wasn't really able to watch many of these or any of these fights at all. I was only able to go back and check things afterwards. I was pretty busy on Saturday, but looking back, very successful day. My only loss on last Saturday's picks was Saeed, and I could speak for hours about how annoying Bryce Mitchell is, just going in that fight and having zero success outside of some wrestling. Like, that's it. If Bryce Mitchell wasn't able to land a couple of takedowns and have almost 10 minutes of control time, he would have gotten absolutely beat up. Wouldn't have even been close. In fact, round one, he got outstruck and arguably easily lost round one. In fact, I believe every judge agreed that Bryce lost round one, but he goes in rounds 2 and 3 and actually lands a takedown and continues to wrestle, and that was one of the more boring fights I've ever seen. And he has the gall to go and call for a title shot, or say that he's maybe not saying he should be the next in line for a title shot, but he's like, yeah, I'm going to compete for a belt. Like, no, you're not, dude. You are not competing for a belt, getting almost 10 minutes of control time and landing 13 strikes in a fight. That's the most boring thing I've ever seen. So in my opinion, stock is down for Bryce Mitchell, even though he won that fight. And he's still not as good of a fighter as Saeed. He just was able to get on the ground and basically wrestle his way to one of the most boring victories so far in 2025. Outside of that, I know Jose and I discussed a little disappointment, at least from Jose's perspective, on the decision in the main event. Jose believes Whitaker should have gotten maybe a little more respect. And, I tend to make it hard to have a real opinion because, like I said, I didn't get to see the fight live. So it's really hard for me to have a strong opinion. Of course, I picked RDR, so I'm happy that I got the win there. But there's no doubt that was an extremely close fight. And it really could have gone either way. For what it's worth, most people seem to agree that RDR barely won that 5th round and therefore got the split decision win. But it really did kind of come down to the end. Like, neither guy was really that much better than the other. Whitaker landing the knockdown, Rainier getting the takedowns. So they each had their own spots, and it ended up going split to RDR. That's pretty much the biggest notes from last weekend. I think the main other thing to mention is Petr Yan, man. Wow, I put my 5 weight on him, and boy, did he come out. He absolutely dominates Marcus McGee. Got to be proud of that one. Jose also agreed in Yan, but not as confident as me in my 5 weight. But if you rode with me on that one, you came out positive last Saturday afternoon. So that said, let's quickly get into this Saturday's picks. For anyone who's new, we make a 5 weight pick system here, where we pick 5 fights for the currently scheduled UFC Apex card this Saturday. Headline between Taira and Hyun Sung Park. Jose and I weigh our picks in order of confidence. 5 weight being the most confident, 1 weight being the least confident. We make these picks independently and then confer just before the show, so we know what order to go in, because we always start with our locks of the week first. You may notice that Jose's camera is not on today. He is having a few internet issues, so it seems to work better if we just leave it on audio only. So hopefully that is successful for us when Jose's time comes to shine for his 5 weights and all of his weights, really. But that said, without further ado, my 5 weight for Saturday afternoon. Getting straight into the card, but not straight into the main event, because my 5 weight for Saturday afternoon is actually listed as a preliminary on this card. This is Rodolfo Vieira versus Tresean Gore, a middleweight bout. And I don't really need to go and babble on much about this fight. This is obviously 2 lower-end guys in the middleweight division, kind of competing to stay on the roster. Simply put, Rodolfo Vieira is a better fighter overall. Rodolfo Vieira poses way more of a finishing threat. These are both guys that's sport is the word I'm looking for. They sport massively negative striking differentials. Neither one of these guys is a superior striker. It's just not a thing. But Tresean Gore is arguably way worse. Tresean Gore is coming off of a KO loss to Marco Tulio. Um, Tresean Gore has actually only beat Antonio Tricoli and Josh Fremd in the UFC, and those are both by submission. And I'm here to tell you that he will not. He will not. I would put all the money in my bankroll on the fact that he will not submit Rodolfo Vieira. Simple as that. He won't. It's not going to happen. Rodolfo Vieira will win this fight by decision or submission, and that's it. What do you think, Jose?
Yeah, Nick, I 100% agree with you. I have Rodolfo Vera as well. He is my two weight. He could be higher, but just how the other rankings of the other ones fell, he happens to be my two. But I do think if I could, if it wasn't for the other fighters I have higher than him, he should be higher. Just he's fighting. Shangor is nearly as good as Vera, and not only that, just not nearly as experienced. And though Tresean Gore, he is a tough guy and he has power. I just think Vera is overall the better fighter in this matchup, and I see him getting the win. In any style, to be honest, whether it's decision, it's either going to be, I think, mostly decision or KO/TKO. To be honest, I feel like this is a good enough fight that should have been on the main card, but other than that, and I said TK, I meant submission, to be honest. I think Vera's going to be more likely to submit Tresean Gore. Tresean Gore, he's mostly the type of guy to, yeah, like, again, he's just not that good. I haven't seen anything from him, and it seems like he's more of a submission guy himself, and him compared to Vera, like, I don't even know. Like, this is an interesting matchup for sure. But that being said, I have Rodolfo Vera, and honestly, yeah, he should have been higher on my list, but I'm sticking with him right now as my two weight. In general, like Tresean Gore, he's just like one of those. He's like almost like an Austin Lane, except not doesn't get knocked out as brutally and as often. But he's just one of those guys where it's like, how is he still getting fights in the UFC almost? But that being said, yeah, that this one I got Rodolfo Vera as well.
So yeah, we'll both agree then. This is on the radar for lock of the week between our 5 weight and 2 weight, and it's a similar situation. Just saying, last week my 5 weight, Jose's 2 weight did win Piotr Jan. So look to that for an easy win coming this Saturday, and we'll leave Jose up for his 5 weight next.
Yeah, and so for my five weight, this comes down. This is on the main card, and this is the fight between Esteban Ribovics and Elvis Brenner. Right now, Esteban Ribovics, I'm actually right here. Got it. Just pulling him up. He is betting favorite at minus 280, while Brenner is the betting underdog at plus 210. This one, Ribovics, we've seen the dude is a total machine. And that being said, I like him. Like, how he looked in his last fight. It was a really, and that, not the Nasrat one, but the one before, the Daniel Zellhuber, that he won split decision. I was a little like, I did go for Daniel Zellhuber, and I thought it was a closer fight, but after looking back, it should have been actually almost unanimous decision for Ribovics. He just went haymakers and just threw heavy combos on Zellhuber, and Zellhuber just pretty much survived it. But that fight should have been stopped actually at one point. And then him losing the Nasrat, like that actually was, I think, an actual closer fight than the Daniel Zellhuber fight. And even though he lost it, that was actually like more like legit. He definitely had a chance to win it. Whereas in the Daniel Zellhuber, it made it look like, oh, he just barely won it. No, the Daniel Zellhuber one, he for surely locked in, even though he wasn't my pick for that fight. But that being said, yeah, in this one, dude is a well-rounded machine. Out of his 14 wins, 7 KOs, TKOs, and 5 submissions. And when he comes in, he put out Terrence McKinney right away in the first round with a brutal head kick. And so the dude, he comes in hot. And then with Brenner, right now he's on a 2-fight losing skid, and he did look good. He did have a good UFC run at the beginning when he first entered in, winning by split, and then getting 2 finishes of his own. But just the damage he's been taking is like just being finished, and just like I think just this matchup, he's almost set up to, I think, get put out by Esteban Ribovics is the best way for me to say. Like, I think this is just a better matchup for Esteban Ribovics. And not only that, just the level of strikes that Esteban Ribovics lands per minute right now. He has 8.08 significant strikes landed per minute, and in Elvis Brenner, he lands 3.99, and both guys do take a lot of shots back. So I think this fight is definitely going to be on the feet. These guys are going to be hit. They're going to throw a lot of haymakers and also get hit a lot. So that's why I think this fight's not going to make it to the end of the third round. And I think Esteban Rijovic is going to be the one to come out on top in this one via KO/TKO. So that's my thoughts on this one. I got Esteban Rijovic. I feel so good about him. He is my 5 weight. What are your thoughts on this one, Nick?
Ooh, okay, yeah, man. I agree with you on Ribovics, and largely for the same reasons you do, honestly. And Ribovics is definitely live for a finish here. I think so. To be specific, I do have Ribovics. He's my 1 weight, so somewhat less. What's the word I'm looking for? Confident is the word I'm looking for. Less confident, and you know what? I will say, usually my 1 weight is somewhat lower confidence, but in this case, honestly, my 1 weight's pretty decently confident. As we go through the rest of my picks, you'll learn that I actually have a lot of confidence in my picks this week. My 1 weight this week, I'm a lot more confident than I was in my 1 weight last week, and even my 1 weight last week still won. So that said, I have Ribovics. He when you look at it, like I'm really impressed by his win against Daniel Zellhuber. I'll never forget that. That was the UFC Sphere fight, I believe. And I was on Ribovics. He was the underdog, I believe, going into that fight. And some people to this day will say that he did not lose to Zellhuber, but you can look at it on paper, which I suppose you can say the same about Robert Whitaker losing to RDR. But you look at it on paper, and Ribovics did win that fight. So that's the thing I'm really impressed by. Zellhuber's looked even better since that fight in 2024. Although Zellhuber also lost to Michael Johnson, so I don't know. I still think I don't know what I'm getting at though is that I still think Daniel Zellhuber's a dog. Like I don't think he's yes he lost to Michael Johnson, but he's not an absolute failure. So trust me that Ribovics is a dog as well, and I think Jose's correct that he has a good chance to dust Elvis Brenner. If not, at least get that unanimous decision win for sure. So that's it. That'll be combined 6 confidence points from us, and just under our lock of the week. But either way, that's arguably an interesting parlay option there. 2 leg parlay between our 2 5 weights. Jose's got Ribovics for his 5. I got Vieira for my 5. You can probably get some decent odds that way. But yeah, without further ado, let's get to the main event. I got a 4 weight pick on this main event, and you know what? I'm not going to be doing anything crazy here. If you followed along with the card here, Tatsuro Taira has had a couple opponent changes, at least one. He was supposed to fight Amir Albazi at first. Albazi got an injury and withdrew. They found a replacement in Hyung Sung Park. We love the guys that are willing to step up. And props to Hyun Sung Park for doing that. He's doing the right thing. Getting on Dana White's good side. He's a younger fighter. 29, I believe, 29 years old. He's 5-0 right now in the UFC. If you include 2 fights in the road to UFC. So he actually had 2 different bouts on the road to UFC. And since he got his contract, he's 3-0 with 3 straight finishes. So that's one thing to consider. But of course, those finishes are against the likes of fighters nowhere near as good as Tatsuro Taira. We did see Taira recently have that split decision loss to Royval. But to me, that really shows that Taira's a dog. I have so much respect for Brandon Royval. I'm a big fan of his. And yeah, okay, Royval just recently lost to Josh Van. But Josh Van is a stud up and up and comer too. Like Josh Van just won like 2 fights in the same month. That dude's going crazy. So no disrespect to Royval, he's a dog, and getting a split decision with him is respectful, regardless if you win or lose. So to me, Taira's going to come in here. He's my 4 weight, and I'm pretty confident that he's going to come in here and get the job done against Hyun Sung Park, mainly just based on some of experience difference, right? Tatsuro Taira has 7 more professional fights, even though he's actually 5 years younger. So that's one interesting aspect of it. Both these guys are below their 30s, but Taira already has more experience. And I like some of the guys he's fought and beat. Alex Perez is a very seasoned veteran, and he finished Alex Perez. Edgar Cairez. Edgar Cairez, okay, he's kind of up and down, but he recently beat CJ Vergara by submission. That's a pretty good win, I would say. And he kind of dusted Cairez too. It was a unanimous decision. So I don't know. Tatsuro Taira to me has proven himself to not, like, yes, he's still a prospect, but what I'm trying to say is he's not like a complete wild card. Like, I feel like you can rely on Taira now to, like, after seeing that fight against Royval, man, like, I'm confident that he comes in and at least performs decently well, and performing decently well will mean winning this fight, in my opinion. So very confident, 4 weight in Taira. Thoughts, Jose?
Yeah, Nick. So for this one, I myself also have Tatsuro Taira. He is my four weight as well. Mostly because yeah, he was preparing for this 5 round war, and not only that, he he's like you mentioned, both these guys have had a good amount of experience, and he going split decision with Brandon Royval. Like Brandon Royval, he is a dog, even though he just lost to Joshua Van. Like other than that, like Brandon Royval, he's like one of those guys. Like he's a top five fighter for sure. Even like you can even say like he beat Brandon Moreno, former champ, as well. So he's definitely a dude that's just still hanging around and can still be back in title contention. So, um, and but that being said, Sung Park, he himself, he this is a bigger step up for him. Even though, as you mentioned, he is the older. They're both young guys still, but he's still the older guy in this one, and both have very good experience. And who knows, he can do kind of a Joshua Van and completely shock us and beat Tyra. But I think Tyra, I just don't think he's gonna take it easy. I think the problem that Brandon Royal had in his fight was he kind of looked like he started off slow and kind of was he kind of got more serious as the fight progressed. And in this one, I think Tatsuro Taira is just gonna. I almost get the vibe he's going to come in and just actually try to make it early and not even give Sung Park any chance versus Brandon Royval and Joshua Van. You can tell he was just kind of going with the flow at first and letting Joshua Van work, which did cost him the fight because then he had to kind of play catch up. In this one, I don't think he's going to give Sung Park any opportunity at all to catch up. And that being said, I think, I mean, Park's obviously never been finished before. Tyra could be very well the first guy to ever do it, but I think this one's probably just gonna make it to the end of the bell. To be honest, I haven't seen enough of Young Sung Park to make a really good judgment on what his weaknesses are. But in this one, like I just definitely think Tyra is just gonna overall piece him up with overall with just strikes and even grappling too. Tyra, he does have some pretty good wrestling out in Japan. They got some wrestling as well, so I definitely expect him to land a takedown or two in this one and not be taken down himself by Park. So I think Tatsuro Taira is just going to overall dominate this fight and win it. Best way to say it is just I think he's going to win unanimous decision in this one. So I agree with you. I have Tatsuro Taira as my four weight as well.
One thing to note too is I couldn't even find. I know for a fact. I'm sure it'll come out eventually. It's Monday. We got to give it some time. A lot of these books don't really. They're not in a rush, so I can't actually find an exact line right now on like FanDuel or DraftKings. I'm sure there exists some on some sports book out there right now, but no doubt Tatsuro is going to be the favorite here. Like Jose mentioned, he was the guy that was originally scheduled to do a 5 round fight against his former opponent, and that dude had to back out. So he's still ready to fight 5 rounds. It's Hyun Sung Park that has to kind of step it up and be ready. Granted, Hyun Sung Park just fought in May, so I do believe he's Park's probably in pretty good shape. He only had to fight for like 3 minutes before he submitted his opponent. So I'm sure, it's almost very, reminiscent of Josh Van's situation now that you mention it, because, Josh Van also came off of a win that was in the first round. I'm pretty sure the fight before that fight against Brandon Royval. So just saying, that's interesting. It seems like Parks kind of put himself in a similar spot there, but I don't think history is going to repeat itself in this scenario. It could be wrong, but I think Tatsuro Taira is going to get the job done. I will say I'm not as confident as Jose in decision. I think I see some likelihood of finish, mainly because with all these finishes that Hyun Sung Park has, 4 or 5 finishes in his last 4 or 5 fights, I think that's going to cause like Taira to start swinging backs, right? I think there's guys out there, right? You start getting haymakers swung at you, and you're going to start swinging them back. So we'll see, but I would say KO or win. But in the end, honestly, I would just probably take Taira straight up. But those things said, we can move on. That covers both of our 5 and 4 weights, and we'll go to Jose's 3 weight.
Yeah, so for my three weight, this is going to come down to the co-main event, the lightweight bout between Matus Rebecki and Chris Duncan. Right now, Matus Rebecki, he is the betting favorite at minus 225, while Chris Duncan is the betting underdog at plus 172. This one, Rebecki, he's been looking just really good. Dude is a very well-rounded fighter. 20 out of his 22 fights, he's only lost twice, and he has been finished both of those fights, but before his most recent loss that happened last year to Diego Ferreira, he was on a roll for a decade, and he hasn't lost the last time he got knocked out and even lost in general was literally 2014 for a small organization. That was literally his fourth fight, and since then he has just been on a roll, and surprised that they even like he hasn't been in the UFC as long yet. He joined in 2023. Um, and he did the Denny One Contender Series in 2022, but hasn't made his official UFC debut in 2023. And since then, he's been on a good roll, but like this is like I don't even know if Chris Duncan like he's not even near like the hardest dude that Rybicki has fought. So like to me, this is almost like a no brainer. Duncan, he is a dog, and he's we've seen him like what he can do, and he's uh I just don't think he's just as good and experienced as Rybicki. That's just the best way to put it. Like Duncan, we see when he gets clipped early, like Manny Torres, who's wild, clipped him early and submitted him in the first round. Then he's been knocked out by Borshev in the second round on the Dana White Contender Series. And since like he's a dude that has just had to go and make it really nasty just to get his wins. And he's a go getter too. Like, but out of his 13 wins, he's finished seven. He's won 7 by KO and only submitted 3. And he's been more on the submission role lately. His last 2 fights being 1 via submission, and he's only won 3 via submission overall in his entire career. So, and Mateusz Gamrot, he's a very well-rounded fighter. I don't think he's never been submitted before. I don't think he's going to have to worry about Chris Duncan submitting him. And the biggest thing I guess he will have to worry about from Chris Duncan would be Chris Duncan probably putting lights out, because though Rybicki has a lot of experience and he's only got, again, his 2 losses, that does somewhat show like his chin isn't quite there, and he got actually knocked out by Diego Ferreira in the 3rd round. So if this fight does make it past the 2nd round and goes into the 3rd, and Chris Duncan is still going, that's when I would start getting just still a little worried, depending how Mateusz Rebecki is looking, because it's just his chin. But overall, I think he's just gonna be overall the better fighter and more of a powerhouse type of dude. And even though Chris Duncan has a longer reach than him, he has a 5.5-inch reach advantage over Rebecki. That's just that's a big reason why I kind of just I'm a little just worried, at least in the later rounds. Is like if Chris Duncan is still going, he throws a high volume of strikes, lands 4.2 significant strikes per minute, and Rybicki does absorb 4.13 per minute. So if the fight prolongs and Chris Duncan with the longer reach advantage is still landing on Rybicki quite a bit in that 3rd round, that chin could start softening up a bit and make him maybe more susceptible to be knocked out. But again, he's just such an experienced guy. I just think overall Rybicki is just going to be the powerhouse guy and get the job done. And when it comes to grappling too, both these guys are actually good wrestlers. So I definitely expect this fight to be taken to the ground at some point, and I think it's going to be a fun grappling match on the ground. Even though Duncan doesn't have as many submissions as Rybicki, he's still got good grappling and wrestling in general. So I think this one's going to be a fun fight, both on the feet, on the ground. But I think Rybicki is just going to be a little more aggressive and ultimately get the win in this one. Nick, what are your thoughts on this fight?
Finally, we got a disagreement. It's fun to disagree sometimes, and I'm going to pick Chris Lee Duncan for my. I'm going to be picking him for my second, my 2-weight. Sorry. So we're going to disagree, and Duncan is that underdog, I believe, as I see. Duncan's at plus 172, Rybicki is at minus 225, so that's part of the reason. I really like the value that you're getting out of Duncan. I mean, look at this guy. He's coming off 2 straight finishes and guillotine chokes at that, and I'm with you. Like, I do think Duncan and Rybicki are good wrestlers, and honestly, I would agree that I wouldn't expect Duncan to get a submission win on Rybicki either. I think, if anything, these guys wrestle around a little bit, and neither of them submits each other. But I could be a little bit wrong on that. But either way, I think they would both respect their boxing acumen enough, and they would just keep the fight standing. It might have some wrestling involved, but it's not going to be like the difference maker of the fight. And that said, if that is the case, I'm going to take Chris Duncan. I like that Chris Duncan has a bigger frame. He's 3 inches taller, about 5 inches of reach advantage. I think that's going to matter on the feet and on the ground. I think Duncan is going to wear slowly wear on Rebecca over the course of this fight, even though it's only 3 rounds. And I think he's just going to tire Rebecca out and win by decision, potentially win, by I guess a KO. But in the end, I would actually go over 2.5 rounds if I had to. But I do lean Chris Duncan. I like the value here, and I think yes, he's a little less experienced if you look at just strictly number of fights fought in, but. Both these guys have a decently positive striking differential, so I would expect them to utilize that. But also, as Jose says, they're both wrestlers. They both land over 3.5 takedowns per 15 minutes, and we could see some wrestling back and forth too. In which case, I would expect whoever gets more control time to get the decision win, and also kind of playing in my over 2.5 prediction. So either way, I'm not thinking submission either way. I'm thinking finish or over 2.5, but I like Chris Duncan.
Yeah, and that's and if I didn't say before, yeah, I have Rebecca as my 3 way, and yeah, yeah, that's ultimately what you think will happen is what I'm scared will happen is yeah, like Rebecca just kind of wears Duncan wears Rebecca down, and then later in the rounds that reach advantage and the strikes just start to add up, and then and then if he doesn't knock out Rebecca, then Duncan can definitely he'll probably start controlling him on the ground more, and then if
Yep.
no one gets put out, it'll probably come down to that the control time on the ground
Yeah.
and significant strikes.
Yeah, man. Honestly, pretty much. So, yeah, man. So we'll disagree on that one, and we have one more fight to discuss for this show, and that'll take us to our last fight of the main card. Depending on where you're looking, this fight could be opening the main card. It looks to be like the second fight on the main card, but either way, this is Neil Magny versus Eliu Zaleski. I'm going to be taking Neil Magny here. I think these guys are honestly similar matchups. Like Neil Magny and Zaleski have kind of similar styles and game plans, if you ask me in general. But what we're looking at here is 4-inch height differential and a 7-inch reach differential in Neil Magny's favor. We're also looking at a decent experience boost in Neil Magny's favor. I like who Neil Magny's been in there with. Some of the best, some of the more recent best as well. And not that Eliu Zaleski isn't fighting good fighters, but I don't think Eliu Zaleski has fought anyone as good as Ian Gary, or Gilbert Burns, or even Shavkat. And all three of those guys, Neil Magny's had to step up to. So I think with that said, Neil Magny would be so much more of a interesting favorite if he didn't have to fight against guys that are basically competing for the title. And I think we all know that Neil Magny's not really like a title contender. He's just one of the best He's been one of the best gatekeepers in this division, and I don't even mean to say that as an insult. He's a guy that as a prospect you fear, and as a guy that you're like excited at the same time to fight against, because that's like, wow, like if I can beat this guy, I'm going to be ranked, and that's huge. So all that said, this to me is one of the hardest tests for Eliu Zaleski. And it's not even to say that he's a young fighter or some sort of newcomer. Like, Zaleski and Neil Magny are basically the same age. And we all know Neil Magny's been around there for a while now. So I say that to say that I just think Neil Magny's going to be able to use all this experience he's learned and the things he's learned from guys that are just way better than both of them, and he'll be able to utilize that knowledge and that experience, and I think he gets a decision win. I'd be very confident to say 3-round decision win for Neil Magny. What do you think, Jose?
Yeah, so this is the agreement we have. Obviously, my last weight's my 1 weight. Neil, yeah, obviously the last two fights did not go Neil Magny's way, but those dudes, the difference between them and Zaleski dos Santos is that those are just younger prospects that are up and coming, like Michael Morales and Carlos Pradas, and then he beat Mike Malott. So, and that's the thing about Neil Magny, like there's just the times where he just shows up, he's on his A game, and that's how he was when he showed up against Mike Malott. Mike Malott, a younger prospect as well, and he runs into Neil Magny, and Neil Magny stops him right in his tracks. And Neil Magny, and then he beats dudes that he wasn't supposed to beat, like when he beat D Rod as well. And then even like he's seen the who's who in this division, and Zaleski dos Santos, he himself is not as much experience as Neil Magny, but a pretty comparable amount of experience, and he's the same age, and he kind of was up and coming, but like the level of competition that he's faced isn't, I don't think, really the same as who Neil Magny's faced, and but he does have a lot of experience in the UFC, which does come a long way. It was a long time ago, but he does have a win over Sean Strickland in 2018, back when Strickland was a welterweight, and Benoit Saint Denis as well. So he's fought some dudes, but not nearly as much as the who's who compared to Neil Magny. And that 7-inch reach advantage that Neil Magny has over Solidski is huge. Neil Magny, and that's the thing with Neil Magny. He's such a tall, lengthy dude, and the only thing that always seems to stop that kind of slow him in his tracks is when dudes put him against the cage. That seems like the number one thing I've noticed all fighters do against Neil Magny is how to neutralize him. Not so much take him down and try to or stay on the feet and try to strike with him, but literally pin him against the wall, against the cage, and just hold him there and just try to beat him up against the cage. Just wall work. That's all it is. So if Zaleski comes in doing that game plan, it could be somewhat of a long night for Neil Magny. But if Neil Magny can get off the cage and not have his back towards the cage and keep it kind of centered, I think it's going to be his in the taking. I like the value that he has too. In this fight being the underdog, being plus 154. I think that's just big value. Again, like Zaleski's not like Michael Morales and Carlos Pradas. He's not, or Ian Gary. He's not those guys. But he is still like good enough, and he was kind of viewed as a prospect before. But it's definitely kind of I don't want to say a step down, but someone more at Neil Magny's level. It's kind of fine because like he's a good Neil Magny is a I hate to say it too, like a gatekeeper, but he's been in the UFC for so long. He's only getting older. I don't see any of these guys going for title contention soon. It's just literally just a fight. This is what it is. And that being said, I think this is a winnable fight for sure for Neil Magny. And that being said, I have him taking this, and I don't see him finishing Zaleski. I see this being just more a decision win for Neil Magny. So that being said, I got Neil Magny. He is my one way. Just he just his last two fights. The reason why he's just lower as a rank one, as my rank one in this, is just because he was his last two fights. Again, they were younger prospects, but they did put him out as well. So 2024 was not good in terms of out of his 3 fights, he got knocked out twice in the first round. So seeing how he's going to bounce back from those 2 losses of it being knocked out is the only thing that I'm kind of questioning to see, because Neil Magny does seem to surprise me a lot every time. So like just when you think he's done or he's out the door, he comes back. So that's why I still have some faith in siding with him in this one, and that's why he's my one weight. So this one's an agreement we have, but he's my one weight for this one.
Sounds like you might be more confident than some of your other picks. I don't know. That's an interesting. It sounded to me like you got some confidence over there, my boy Neil Magny.
I mean, like the thing, it's kind of like the fight last week with Rainer DeRitter and Robert Whitaker. It's like he should win it. You look at it on paper and the confidence of what you've seen on Neil Magny, but there's always just that one variable that makes you question everything. Like last week for me, was Rainer DeRitter. He's good, double champ from one coming over. He's bigger than Robert Whitaker, and then like I feel like like he's one of those who just keeps surprising, so it's hard to fight against that. And for me with Neil Magny, it's just hard to like, even though like on paper he's lost the last 2, so I'm not surprised he is the underdog in this one. But he's just has like, you look at the level of competition, the dudes he's gone against, and now he's actually going against a guy same age as him, a little bit similar of experience. But Zaleski's also fought smaller dudes compared to Neil Magny, like Benoit Saint Denis, now a lightweight, and where Neil Magny's fought dudes that have moved up to middleweight. And so that being said, like, or are just straight up former champs. So that being said, and he's just overall fought the who's who, to be honest. Like, he's fought almost everyone in the UFC, it seems like. So I am confident in Neil Magny, but it's more like hopeful in terms of like last week I was hopeful for Robert Whitaker. This week I'm hopeful for Neil Magny. Hope that's not a trend where whoever I'm hopeful for is just still losing. So yeah. It was a tough one to rank this week, but him being the underdog, it's just hard not to side with him either. Just like the experience. I hope he doesn't get knocked out again in the first round. That's for sure.
Well, that'll do it. I got nothing more to say. Thanks for watching, everybody. Have a good afternoon, and we'll be back next week as always.